Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Tripp. I'm here to continue the conversation on ancient Greece. Specifically, I'm going to talk to you about governments of ancient Greece. Now, before we begin this lesson, I want to point out a couple things. One, there's no additional reading that you have to do today, but you do need to complete a Google form assignment that is posted on Google Classroom. Now, all the information you need for that Google form can be found in this lesson, so be sure to pay close attention to what's being said. The second thing I want to point out, as we are learning about these governments of ancient Greece, just kind of think about how there are maybe some similarities in our own government. Now, we're not going to really get into that part today. That's for Friday. But if you're thinking about these ideas now, it's only going to help you with your understanding on Friday. Okay, so we're going to begin with oligarchy. We talked a little bit about this last week, and you looked up the word for your vocabulary yesterday, so you're familiar with it. While I'm talking about oligarchy, though, I'm specifically going to talk about Sparta, the city state of Sparta. An oligarchy is ruled by a council of leaders, and they're usually the wealthiest citizens. Now, all throughout history, you can go and look back, and generally, almost always, the people that were the leaders were the wealthy people because it gave them certain powers that allowed them to be the leaders. And that was no different for Sparta. Now, Sparta was ruled by two kings. And they were from two different ruling families, and they worked together to rule over the military. But there was also an assembly, and the assembly was made up of all male citizens over the age of 20. And it met once a month to pass laws and to make decisions about war and peace. So, should they go to war with another city state or just keep the peace? Now, the interesting part about the assembly is they voted by shouting. So these men would get together, and there's lots of them in this assembly, and they'd be yelling over each other on sharing their thoughts or voting about how something should be done. You can only imagine how chaotic that situation must have been. Sparta also had the five Effers. And the five Effers were chosen by the assembly each year, and it was a lottery. So all eligible citizens, they had equal chance to be chosen for this, but it kind of was a lottery. Were they lucky enough to be picked? The five Effers, they had the power to veto or forbid legislation or laws that were being offered. They held this position for only 1 year and were not eligible to serve again after that. And what that really allowed is for there to be more Greek citizens giving their voice in the government, and potentially maybe some diverse ideas would be brought in because so many people had a say. Now, Sparta also had the Council of Elders, and this was 28 men who were over the age of 60, and they would propose laws to the assembly, and they also served as the highest court. Now, the Council of Elders held their position for life. So once they got that position, that was theirs for the rest of their life. I want to also talk to you about democracy because while Sparta and some of the other city states followed oligarchy, more and more city states were giving their people a say in government, and that is what democracy is. I'm specifically going to talk to you about Athens today. And at first, it was only the male Athenians who owned land were citizens. But over time, we'll see some shifts in that, some changes. All Athenian citizens were believed to be qualified for public office. In fact, they were expected to hold public office. And so instead of having elections, they Athenians also used a lottery system, much like Sparta, where anyone that was a citizen had an equal chance to be chosen to be a part of a public office. Now, as Athens' democracy evolved, there were sometimes ruled by tyrants. Now, the thing is that in Greek history, a tyrant ruler wasn't necessarily like a bad thing. It just meant it was the person was the only ruler, right? But there were some of those tyrants who ended up being really harsh and didn't listen to other people. And it was kind of like their way or the highway. And that's where the word that we know now when we consider tyrant, it usually means that. Like when someone's referred to as a tyrant, it's they're acting that way. Like it's their way or the highway, right? But in Greek history, it wasn't really always like that. Um, some were really good. It was just they had all the power. So I want to start now to talk about the important rulers of Athens. And the first one we're going to talk about is Draco. Now, Draco would be considered a tyrant. Now, he established a written legal code of law with very harsh penalties. Now, the fact that he created a written code of law is a great thing, but the fact that they had these really harsh penalties is probably why he's considered a tyrant. The word draconian actually comes from his name and means cruel and severe. And sometimes laws are considered as draconian today because they have what's considered unnecessarily harsh or severe punishments. I want to take a minute here to talk about why it's so important that there's a written code of law. Prior to this, laws were passed down by word of mouth, right? And we know what happens there. Things change, things shift. People get confused. What does it mean? But by having a written code of law, it, there's a lot of good that comes from that. For one, it gives very clear guidance to the people as to what they can and cannot do. Also, they can be referenced. And what I mean by that, it's actually good for both sides of the law. So if someone's being accused of a law, they can specifically look at a law and show the accuser, which is most likely a government official, say, look, this is what it says. I did not break this law. On the other hand, the government official can take a look at a law and say, look at what this says specifically. See, very clearly here it says what this is. You broke the law. Another thing it's good for is that it prevents rulers from making up laws on the spot. Like they can't just make up a law on a whim. They've got the laws are written down. The people know what the laws are. They have to honor them. So it keeps them from just doing whatever they want to do. And finally, it allows for them to be consistent when they're passed down to future generations. There's no questions like, what was that law again? Or what did they used to do? It's very clear. It's written down, it can be referenced, it's documented, there's no confusion. Now, there's certainly people that look at laws and question their meaning. Like, what did they mean by them? What was the intention of this law at the time it was written? And people sometimes see that differently, but that leads to a conversation that can happen because it was written down. The next leader I want to talk about is Solon, and he ruled around 594 BCE and was not considered a tyrant at all. In fact, he canceled all land debts and freed debtors from slavery. Now, one thing that made a person a slave, we know that it's, they're captured in battle or they're born to a slave, but it's also because they had a debt. They owed money to somebody and they couldn't. pay off that debt. So, in order to pay it off, they would be their slave. What Solon did was cancel those debts, so now those people were free. He also created a new, less harsh written code of law. Additionally, Solon is known for creating a two-house legislature, and it was a council of 400, was made up of nobles who wrote the laws. That's one of the houses, and an assembly who was made up of non-nobles, citizens, and they approved the laws. So they had to work together and kind of keep a check on each other. Now, Pisistratus is the next ruler I want to talk about, and he ruled from about 561 to 527 BCE. And he divided the large estates among landless farmers, which is extending citizenship to men born in Athens who did not own land originally. Now they're going to own it. What you see is the definition of citizen changes to include more men. Now, the last one I want to talk about is Cleisthenes, and he ruled around 526 BCE. He extended citizenship to even more people, including the Metics. And the Metics were the free foreigners living in Athens. We talked about the non citizens, these free people who came from other city states to live in a specific area. Well, now these people, these men, were going to have citizenship. He also created a council of 500, which again was chosen by a lottery, and he expanded the power of the assembly. And it was that all 30,000 citizens of Athens belonged to the assembly. And finally, he used a jury of 201 to 1,001 citizens to decide court cases. And you might be asking, why 201 to 1,001? Why not just 200 to 1,000? Because he didn't want an even number so it wouldn't break evens. There always had to be, if it's odds, someone's going to win. Their side is going to win. Their decision is always going to win. Okay, so when you talk about ancient Greece democracy, we know that it's a direct democracy and that citizens participate directly in the decision making. Well, this worked well in Athens because the population was small and so was the size of the city state. But this type of democracy is not practical in large countries like the United States. So, what you see is representative democracy, and that's when citizens elect others to represent them in government. And they elect these people because they see these people as someone who thinks the same way as them. So, when these people who are making decisions and passing laws on behalf of all the people, they're chosen by, like, they're voted for because a person believes that they're going to make those decisions the same way that they would. Okay, so today you're going to complete the Google form that's posted in Google Classroom. You might need to go over this lesson video again to refresh your memory or to clarify a few things to help you, but that is really it. If you have any questions, please make sure you ask your teacher for any kind of clarification.